Hello and welcome to Love Work Life Training Academy. This week we're working on getting paid more for what you do. As people log in, again, it's a very busy webinar. As people log in, if you could please just drop a quick note into the chat room to say that you can hear me, that'd be very much appreciated. As always, before we start, let's just sort of go through some of the people that are coming in as they come in. We've got Connection on today, Amicus, Amblemere Consultants, Premier, Experis, Impact, Change, Judd Recruitment, West Ray, Global CTS, Pivot, SLR Solutions, Ann Pentage, May and Stevenson's, Invictus, Bonbon, Harper Evans, Prosper, Ignata, Aventus Legal, The One Group, Hall Recruitment, TTS 24/7, MCS Group, Star Recruitment, Athwell, Taste Hospitality, G2 Group, TN Recruits, JLS, and there's more people coming in as we go. So thanks for everyone who's dropped a quick line saying they can hear. There's lots and lots of consultants on from multiple agencies, which is really great. So I'll just give it a couple of seconds as people come on. Let me give you an idea of how this webinar's come about and what this one's happening. So I'm going to be very honest with you guys. Some guys might be going through this presentation as we get into it and go, I'm sure I've seen this presentation before. And you'd be right. You may have seen it 4 or 5 weeks ago. However, I delivered the same presentation back to a client, and the client turned around and said, wow, that's very different to the one that you delivered 4 or 5 weeks ago, and very more in depth with regards to what you actually should be doing and what we could be doing as we move into the new marketplace. And it was strange. I then had another conversation with another client who gave me almost the same identical feedback, that it was the in-depth side of this webinar that they were really interested in. Last time we gave probably what I would class, or what they were classing as, surface. This is going to give far more in-depth to help you build more as we start to build towards the new future. So I apologize, they are the same slides. I've added some new stuff into the slides to help people understand a little bit more of what we're trying to do. But it gives an opportunity to really focus now on getting our desk right for the new world of recruitment and moving forward in the marketplace. So as people start to come in, we're still lots of people coming in. Okay, let me just kick off so they can catch up as we go. So what we're going to look at is the objectives of today are going to be very, very straightforward. We're going to start looking at the mountain you must climb. And again, I'm going to change a lot of things. Evaluate what we're working, grade your job specs. What does your client base look like? And this is where we start to really go a little bit more granular than we've ever done before. And then we're going to look at the recruitment life cycle, expectations, planning your day, and then 7 recruitment tips, and we'll work on those 7 recruitment tips. So let's start to look at the things that we need to do first and foremost. So let's look as we work about the mountain that you must climb. Now, as a manager and a recruitment person, okay, or a recruiter, I'm going to give you 2 definitions of this, because obviously there's going to be people on here who are recruiters and people on here who are managers. And I think there's a very big differentiator between the 2, but where they collide is when we start to create a harmonious environment, if I could say the word today. So the first thing we're going to start to look at is we're going to look at our basic training, okay? Basic training and product knowledge. Now think, a lot of recruiters who've been on furlough and a lot of recruiters have been in work. Those that have been in work may have had a reducement in jobs. Those who've furloughed have obviously not worked. I think what a lot of people have found out when they are looking at this, they're looking at how fragile their recruitment process is, how weak in certain areas it is, and how strong it is. So training back on the basics and ensuring your product knowledge as a recruiter now is almost paramount for your return to the market. For you to be successful, you really have to understand what your basic knowledge is and what products you are selling, because there'll be new products out there and new things. As a member, once you start as a recruiter, and you start to allow to do the things that you can do on your own, it starts to show that you're understanding the marketplace. You're absolutely embedding the basics every call that you make, and you're optimizing your time within the marketplace. So if you're sat here and you're still 3, 4, 5 years into the job, and your manager's still all over you like a rash, then you need to start to think about what you are doing or not doing that stops you being sort of really allowed to do what you want to do. The next side of that is when you become valued as a team member. Does your voice count? Are you listened to? And I often talk to recruiters as I'm working with clients about how they feel valued. When they say, does their voice count? And what I generally find is that those that have got a really good understanding of the basics and can add true value to their management team are generally listened to. Those who are just sort of going over the basics and cutting corners generally aren't listened to. What I tend to find is as we start to go up to the top end of the marketplace where you get promotion, what happens is the people that are trusted and allowed to do what they want because their basics are impeccable and they're delivering really good results based on their basics, they're the ones that generally get promoted and moved forward. So if you're coming back into the marketplace now, you've got to start thinking, what can you do? If you're a manager, you've got to look at it in a very different way. You've got to start thinking, do my staff have the basics? And do they understand the new products that I've actually provided to them? Just because they've been off and just because you've then added new products doesn't mean to say they understand how those products work and how those products should be sold, or what benefits that those products actually have for your clients and for themselves. So there's an opportunity now to re-establish the understanding of your consultants and drive that. You've got to give your guys the wings to fly. You've got to give them the opportunity. You've got to let them get out there. So sometimes micromanaging isn't the style. Let them make mistakes. Let them learn from those mistakes. But if you don't let them make those mistakes, then you're never going to know whether they're able and capable of doing that. So the next thing as a manager, you've got to find out, is your people, do they value you? And if they value you, they will come for advice. They will talk about things. They will ask questions. And that's all about you listening to them. If they feel that they're going to be listened to and things are going to be acted upon, then they're more than likely feel more valued than they have before. And that's the big disconnect that I've seen in some agencies, that the consultants don't feel valued and trusted, and the managers don't provide value and listen to what they're saying and act on those type of things that can change things. If we start to do that, all types of the marketplace then get promoted. The big thing that we start to change, and I think the big thing that we need to start to look at, is how we evaluate what we are working. And we're going to talk about this an awful lot. Now, I've shown this graph before, and people have seen this graph, that when we start to plot our clients, we need to plot our clients properly. So the blue dots are our clients, and the bottom axis is time, and the top axis is money. So if we start to look at this, if we look at with the top left-hand corner, that's when we're spending low time, but we're making high profit. And when we go further into this presentation, we're going to start to look at these type of clients and what we're doing with these clients. There is an opportunity there to really make something from that client, but are we absolutely maximizing that opportunity? In the bottom left-hand corner, we have low time invested and low profit. But do we know enough about the client? Because we've got low time invested to really understand what the client actually does. Again, as we talk about diversification later on, okay, there's a possibility that the clients where you've invested a low amount of time and making low profit may have a marketplace that if you diversify into, you can make far more profit from it, and therefore driving the client further into the area that you want that client to be. We will all have clients where we're investing a high amount of time and a low profit. And this is what we talk about a vanity client. And I always talk about on numerous things about vanity clients. You have a vanity client, sanity clients, and then you have what we call profanity that comes in. And what I mean by that is you have the vanity client that you love dealing with because it's a big name. But when the sanity comes in, when you understand how little money you're actually making out of that client and how much time you're wasting, that is when the profanity starts. That is when we start swearing and understanding how much time we've wasted and what we're doing. So we've got to start to understand that there are clients out there that are vanity clients. It is not sane to work with. And therefore, we need to work on reducing those clients. Because we know that we should be driving all our clients to the top right corner. Clients that we invest high time with and make big profit, our cash cows, so to speak. And we need to drive our clients into there. So if we've got people that are in any of these marketplaces and driving around these marketplaces, and if I can get this to work, it'll be great. If we can get people that we can truly work and we are driving around this type of area here and all our clients fit into this area here, then all of a sudden we are in a real big, we're creating ourselves a really big opportunity. If we're working with clients that are down on this line constantly, and there's lots of agencies, trust me, who work on these clients constantly and spending all this time, but we're making little profit, we need to really think about what we're doing. And up in this corner, there is opportunity. All around this area, there is opportunity to drive clients into this area. So we've got to start to think about how we do that and what we do. So we talked about last time, we talked about grading our job specifications. We talked about why we should grade job specifications. Okay, and I'm just going to very quickly push through job specifications, what we mean by job specifications. So again, I got asked on this. I was speaking to a client 2 days ago on Monday, and they just picked up 5 new jobs from a client, and they were absolutely overjoyed that they picked up 5 new jobs. And I talked to them about grading the jobs, and they said, well, the client's desperate for these people. And I said, have you graded the jobs? And they said, no. I said, right, okay, let's go back and grade the jobs, and let's grade the jobs between 1 and 10. And it was very interesting. A 10 client, to me, the best job to work is where you've got a retained client who's paying you money to recruit. You are exclusive with that client, and you have a candidate base that can fill that job almost immediately. And then we watered down from there. When we discovered these 5 jobs, we discovered most of them, 4 of them, in fact, were actually grade 5 or less. And when we said grade 5, what we had was a job where the client wasn't really committed. He just wanted us really to send CVs. The job spec was reasonably loose. He wouldn't really fill much more out in the job specification for us. And there was very little commitment with regards to interview process and recruitment process. And so I always said, why are we actually working that client? What is it about that client that is attractive to you? And what was attractive is that they were a client of name, a client that they wanted to work with. They were that vanity client, and it was that vanity client that made them want to work with them. When we started to drill further in, we said, right, okay, we've got to take the 4 requirements that we are at grade 5. We had 1 at grade 8, and we've got to try and work those up the marketplace. How can we get that requirement to be a better requirement? That means going back to the client and really focusing on the client. They started to do that, and the client started to withdraw further and further. Why are we asking all these questions? And when we started to actually tell them why we were asking the questions and what we were trying to get out of them, all of a sudden the client opened up. All of a sudden the client started to realize that if we truly understand what we're looking for and they are committed, then they'll get a far better service from the agency. The client was just happy that they had jobs to fill, and so was the agency. But when we drilled into it and started to change the client's mindset, the client provided far more information and actually gave the job in the end exclusively to the consultant, which changed it more because he was going to go out to other agencies. So it's really important that we grade our job specifications and work at them. So this is where we start to change things from the last presentation. What do your clients look like? I asked a question of the client and said, you've been in lockdown now for 13 weeks. Have you now started to really understand how fragile your client base is? What have you truly learned about your client base in the last 3 months? And it was a really interesting sort of look on the client's face that he suddenly understood how weak the relationships were with his clients and how fragile those relationships were. And he had to start to work on building relationships with those clients. So he had to look further into the client marketplace and what they're working with. So we talked about how many buying clients did he have, but we changed the word buying. We talked about how many clients are going to buy. Have you investigated your client base so you understand what they've got likely coming out in the next 3 weeks, the next 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months? Can you change your view of working with a client from being a transactional purchase and we all class it's a distressed purchase? Well, they're not distressed purchases. If you know what your client is looking to recruit beforehand and they have planned that, it's not a distressed purchase. It's part of their recruitment process. It's part of their business growth process. It's part of their recovery strategy. So all of a sudden, by talking to a client about what are they going to be buying from you or how many clients are going to be recruiting from you, we start to understand that. When we looked at his client base, he knew very few clients that had given them that information. So he started to demonstrate how fragile his client base was. We then talked about how many prospect clients does he have? And he started to talk about all these prospects. And I said, have you graded the prospects? Do you know where the prospects sit and why those prospects sit in that marketplace? Do you know whether or not you can fill the jobs that those clients actually have? And again, I got this sort of look of, well, yes, they've got clients that will have jobs, but are they jobs that we really want? Are they jobs that we can fill? Are they jobs that we want to actually have on? Or are they jobs that's going to just clutter up our day that we're never going to fill? Which led to the next thing. How many clients do we have requirements on with at this moment in time? And that was very few, which then linked back to question 1 about how many buying clients or how many clients do you know are going to buy from you? And he started to understand then how fragile his client base was, and the cracks start to appear. And what can they do to try and change that? We then want to know how many clients that you had interviews with. And this is a question that we asked before. We want to know how many clients you have interviews with because we want to know what's going on each week. If you've got clients with interviews, you have now got mass potential to make a placement. There are people on this call, and I've seen come on this call, who I've been working with, who have made themselves as consultants a placement every month during lockdown, if not more than one placement every month. And if you're a recruiter and you're making placements every month, it shows that you've got some really good understanding with your client base. Your client base trusts you. Your client base is coming to you at their worst time and working with you. So we've got to make sure that we are absolutely understanding if we have interviews on, this is starting to show that our clients value our service and value it properly. So we've got to make sure that we understand that and work those things all the time. We then start to get back into the goal things. How many clients do you need to reach your goals and targets? And again, as we start to probably readdress targets, we've got to readdress our clients. But we've got to start to look at a different slight type of client, which I'm going to touch on very soon. How many interviews per month does it take to make your target? Now, at the moment, if you're just breaking even, you're doing well. If you're driving to go above break even, you've got to start to understand that stat, because interviews start to lead to placements. Yes, jobs are the catalyst, but interviews, when it starts to become true reality, you have something that client potentially wants. So we've got to really start to drive into that hard. So understanding how many interviews you need to make a placement is really important. If you base that on the ones that you have done in the past, then all of a sudden you know. Now, if we start to change then the type of jobs that we work, and again, I'm going to talk about the type of jobs that we work, then all of a sudden you understand how important that interview stat is. And then the question that I asked was, if your big client stopped recruiting today, how would you replace it? Well, if I'd have asked that question 15 months ago, I'm pretty certain that most people, 90% of people on this call, would have laughed in my face and said, well, yeah, if a big client stops recruiting, I'll replace it. Well, the chances are your big clients have stopped recruiting. So what are we going to do to replace it to become almost recession proof? So we have to make sure that we have a plan in place to look at the clients that we're working with and what their fragile marketplace looks like. How's that going to affect you if things like this ever happens again? And obviously we were talking about what clients are going to buy from the next 4 weeks. Okay, that gives you a really good lens on the marketplace. So this is when we start to drill down, which we didn't do in the last call and the last meeting. So I want to look at this. This is the usual, let's call it sales funnel. You've got big clients that are putting lots of requirements into your sales funnel. You've then got a smaller set of clients that are putting different types of roles into your sales funnel. And then you've got, again, a smaller set of clients that are in your sales funnel. Now, what people think about a sales funnel is they group people into their sales funnel on an individual basis and hope they get their clients through the end of that funnel to make a deal. However, if you start to group your clients in certain types of groups, then as you can see, the size of those bubbles, there's only one bubble that will get through the bottom of that funnel. Our job is to start to identify which clients fit in which bubble and what can we do to change them and move them out of that bubble into a smaller bubble so they fall through and make a deal. It's a very, very different way of looking at your client base to make sure that you are maximizing your time and you're working with lots of clients that will come to the size that fall through the bottom of your funnel. If you look at those clients and all your clients are working in the big bubble, then you're never going to get them through the bottom of that funnel. So we've got to start to think about what we're doing. So again, we measure this constantly. We measure requirements. So we measure the requirements and the CVs we send to requirements. We measure the CVs that we send and how many of those CVs turn into interviews. And then we look at how many interviews turn into offer, and we look at the placement to requirement ratios. And these ratios have been standard, certainly in my lifetime, and the ones that the only measures that I truly use to see what my business is doing. How many new requirements have I canvassed on per week? How many have got CVs to? How many have converted into interviews that week? And how many placements have I made that week? If I can then suddenly understand how many requirements I need to make a placement, I need to know how many CVs I need to send that week to make sure that placement happens, and so on and so forth. So they are standard type of things. But this is where we start to get a little bit more in depth. I want to tip my scales in the right way. If you start to look at your client base and look at it properly, you will discover that 80% of your profit comes from 20% of the jobs that you work. And they're jobs where you've got a known candidate base, full client commitment. But when we tip these scales, 80% of your jobs that you work only present 20% of your profit, because we're working with jobs that lack commitment, job requirements where we need to generate new candidates and find new candidates because they're not there. They're the poorest quality of jobs worked. They're low on the grading offer, but we're still working them. We're hiding behind them because we're hiding behind them to hit KPIs. And then the largest number of jobs, the largest number of jobs that we work, or they are the largest number of jobs that we work, and therefore we're wasting time. I remember when I first came into recruitment, and this was playing around my head constantly, ticking away the moments that make up a dull day. You fritter at your hours in an offhand way, kicking around on a piece of ground in your hometown, waiting for someone or something to show you the way. That's the first line of a Pink Floyd song. And that really took home with me constantly in recruitment. If you're wasting hours that make up a dull day because you know most of the clients that you're working with or most of the jobs that you're working aren't going to come to fruition, then you're just frittering away the hours in an offhand way. You're not really doing anything proactive. Just kicking around doing that and waiting for someone to show you the way, then you're not learning. You're not learning at all. So you've got to really drive hard and work hard. The next or the final verse of that song is every year it gets shorter, never seeming to find the time. Plans that either come to naught or half a page of scribbled lines hang on their quiet desperation is the English way. The time is gone, the song is over. I thought I'd something more to say. And it was strange. I thought about that verse as I saw people failing in recruitment and leaving the marketplace, because hanging on in desperation is a very, very English way. And hanging on to clients that never, ever produce the results that you demand and require from them needs to change. You can never, ever sit there with your plans if they come to naught. You have to change them. If you're just scribbling lines down and notes down, then you're not understanding the marketplace. You're not understanding your opportunity within that marketplace. So you've got to make sure that you're doing things every single day to make sure you're tipping the scales in the right way, and more of your time is being worked to create more money. So this is what your client base should start to look like. So this is a very interesting way of looking at it. Type A, B, and C, and D, and it could go on forever and a day, depending on what you do, okay? These are the types of requirements that you work. And if you put them, not just perm and contract, so break them down into individual jobs and say that is a core job, and then put the jobs that are very similar within a small percentage of each other, put them in a certain bucket, and you'll start to understand that you've got certain jobs that are type A, certain jobs that are type B, different types of job. And you might have 10, 15, you might have 20, depending on the size of your agency and the markets that you're working in, etc. You'll have lots of different types, but differentiate them all to make sure that you're seeing the marketplace. Then look at the percentage of time that you work on those jobs. How much of your workload is taken up by those jobs? And then look at the percentage of those requirements that you place. What you're suddenly going to find is that you might have type A job that is only 5% of your marketplace, but you fill 90% of those jobs. You might have a type D job that's 25% of your marketplace, and you only fill 10% of those jobs. So all of a sudden you're seeing that you've got a big workload, but very little reward from it. So you start to look at the percentage profit that you are making from there. Once you then can start to see the percentage profit that you're working with, you can start to say, right, where should I truly be focusing my day every day? Who should I be working with? So you look at your average percentage and average pound value per deal, and then you look, have you got matching candidates on the CRM that can instantly fill these type of roles? You can start to now see where you spend most of your time, because you might find that type C and type D jobs are where you spend 80% of your time, and type B and type A jobs are where you spend 20% of your time. But when you look at the profit of type A and B is maybe 80% of your business. So therefore, we've got to start thinking, what can I do with type C and D? And why aren't I working with more type A and B? So it means we can start focusing into a marketplace and say, right, they're the type of clients that I want. I need to find more clients that look like that will give me more jobs that are like that. I can then start to look at the other side of the market where I'm having little success, and I can use this data and I can go back to my client and now give a quantitative sale to my client and say, look at the data that I have, Mr. Client. This is what's going on within your base. This is why you're not making placements, or we're finding it struggle to make placements. You can start identifying those things. It means, therefore, you can start to maximize your time. If you know that job that you've just canvassed on from your client is within type C and D, you know there's a little chance of filling it. So the question is, why are we prioritizing that job first and foremost when you've got a job that's from type A that you want to fill? So our funnel really needs to start to look like this. And the 3 C's here are clients, candidates, and commitment. If we have working with the right client, and we have candidates that can fill the job, and we have commitment, and they are in those right type of roles that we're looking for, then they will fall through the bottom, and you're going to make placements. You're going to make ongoing placements constantly. So we've got to start to think about what we're working. Just picking up jobs at this moment in time is a relief. Picking up the right jobs is going to be productivity that's going to make you money. So we've got to really drive into that and think about what that productivity looks like. And so we go back to our 2 cycles of recruitment, and the 2 cycles are very simple. I always think there are 2 ways. You're either working a requirement or you're not working a requirement. And if you're not working a requirement, then you've got lead generation to do, and this is A and B. So at this moment in time, we know there's going to be lots and lots of candidates out there who are in turmoil. I saw a poll on LinkedIn. 35% of the marketplace, that's a huge percentage of the marketplace, at this moment in time, are considering a move from their employer. Wow, that's a real big change. So if we're talking to these candidates and we're picking up leads and references and referrals, we're now getting potential clients that might have a need. If they fit into your core niche where you're making the money out of, then all of a sudden, you've got a really good client base. If you're targeting clients, you may want to target the candidates that work in those clients and asking the same questions. That means that we've got to start lead conversion. That means we've got to do business development. That means reference calls, generic calls, sellback calls, spec CVs. Find the one that works for you. I had spoke to a client the other day. Spec CVs at the moment for her are working extremely well. So push down your sellback calls, push down your reference calls, and do more spec CV calls and drive that. If that's working for you at this moment in time, drive that. If your reference calls are producing a massive amount more results than anything else, then increase the number of reference calls that you're doing. So start to mix and match the things that you get all the way down, which means when we're patch building, we should be mapping. We should be targeting clients that have perm and contract and that we can generate candidates from. Remember, not every client's going to work with you. So some clients are going to be a hunting ground, somewhere that you can pull candidates from, clients that you can target. So market mapping is important, that you know which clients that you are aiming at and which clients that you're going to fish from to get your candidates. We've got to make sure we are doing those things constantly. And therefore, candidate marketing becomes really important. Hitting target clients with your candidates is really important. That will start to drive interest and desire if you are only putting a small number of candidates to your clients and you're getting a massive return from that. And what I mean by that is if my client is a 95% match to my client, then it should only go to 1 or 2 of those clients that match 95%, not to 20 or 30. If I'm working requirements, I've got to think about when I'm taking the requirement, I've got to flex that spec, I've got to grow that specification, I've got to get better angles, I've got to get more information so I can find the right people. When I'm vetting my candidates, I'm also doing A and B leads, references and referrals. I'm making sure that my flow of information so I can carry on canvassing is constantly coming through. I don't cut corners. I don't say, well, I'm in a rush to find the right candidate, therefore I'm not going to ask these questions. in this marketplace, we can now take time to create a really good shortlist of candidates and make sure we pre-close all of those candidates. I want to make sure that when I'm giving candidate and client feedback, I'm understanding when I've submitted CVs what the candidate's liking, what the candidate and the client are like, but what the client likes about the candidate and what the client likes about the client. That way, again, I'm flexing my spec. Once I get into that interview, I'm doing pre-interview prep. I'm pre-closing the client and the candidate. At post-interview, I'm doing it again, and I'm gathering information or interview process so I know what is going to happen the next interview. I know if I have to flex the spec, if they're asking questions that aren't on the spec, I've got to add those things into the spec. And I make sure that when I get to pre-offer, I've already pre-closed my candidate down. So I'm never offering unless I know my candidate is going to accept. So these two cycles of recruitment are really important, and we've got to really drive those all the way through. We've got to close our client, and we've got to make sure if we have a rejection that we flex the spec. Now, I gave this out a couple of weeks ago, a health check, and it'd be really interesting to see how many people have actually looked at their business and done a true study of their business. Every aspect of recruitment is really important. And if we start to think, okay, lead generation, lead conversion, market mapping, resourcing, spec CVs, etc. If you started to put your people in and say, let's say every person that works for you, you gave them a 10 core strengths. There's 10 strengths here. You mark the strengths of those people in there, and you only put people into these strengths if they are, their number one or their number two strength. So lead generation, how many people have got that as their core top two strengths? Resourcing, how many people have got that as their top core strengths? And when you start to go round this circle and you start to look at your business, you'll suddenly start to see where you have weaknesses. If you're a single recruiter, if you suddenly realize that a core strength is not market mapping, you've either got to work a way to get that to become a core strength, because if not, it's always going to hold you back. If interviewing isn't a core strength and you're a recruiter, is there someone in the business that's great at doing interview prep, great at driving interviews? What can you learn from that person? What can you drive from that person? So we're working all the time to make sure that our health check works, because our engine needs to be running at its optimum constantly. Working jobs versus canvassing, we should be doing the same constantly. Resourcing versus lead generation, we should be doing the same. We should be making sure when we're resourcing, we're doing the same. Internet versus calling. And internet to me has been a keyboard warrior versus calling. There is no excuse now. The digital market is here. Therefore, video interviewing, video calling becomes so much easier. Booking people into your diary. My diary is packed with people booked in for a call, not for a visit or a meeting, but booked in for a call. I send them a diary invite so they know that I'm calling them. Working and developing the most lucrative markets. Remember, the UK stat is that you fill 2 out of every 10 jobs that you take on. 2 out of every 10 jobs that you take on. So if we go back 3 or 4 slides and look at how we can reshape our market and how we can analyze our market, can we drive that 2 out of 10 to 5 out of 10? Can we drive that 5 out of 10 to 6, 7, 8 out of 10? Which means you're maximizing your time and you're working the most lucrative markets. How much more exciting would recruitment be if you're filling more jobs every week, every month? How more lucrative would it be for you as a consultant if you're not wasting 80% of your day? It's not just ticking around. You're just waiting for something to happen. You've got lots of things that's going to happen. That way, you find the hours are not dull. They are ticking away very, very quickly. And at 9 o'clock suddenly becomes 5 o'clock really quickly. So could your client base and candidate pool resources and canvassing lead generation be all done at the same time? The absolute honest truth is yes, they should be all done at the same time. So we've got to work on that. So that means planning our day is very important. And I know for one, it's strange that we write to-do lists, and I've changed writing to-do lists to, writing success lists, and I write a success list every day, and I tick off the successes that I've had every day. I review what I'm doing hourly. I get pulled left, right, and center, clients calling, things that I need to do. You'll have noticed this week I was late sending out the email to invite people on, which, still great because lots of people are still on. But I was late because I got pulled by a couple of clients to one side to do something urgent for them. So it meant that my plan went awry. It was only when I went back to my plan to review it after I'd finished working with those clients that I noticed straight away that I hadn't sent an email. So I sent that email out to everybody, and I got 4 or 5 people responding saying, "Thank you for coming back to me. We thought the job was the training wasn't going to be happening," which is very pleasing. But it means that I'm missing things. So my to-do list, my success list is really important, but I hadn't checked it for 3 hours because I've been taken away with clients. I need to make sure I review it more often. Book yourself a meeting. We've talked about quite often. Sometimes your day gets so hectic that you book yourself a meeting and you've got to work from there. Address problems instantly, and that was what I was doing. I was addressing problems instantly, but they were my clients' problems, not my problems. But that's great because I love addressing my clients' problems because they become my problems. I like to take a break. I like to refresh myself, and I make notes of all the wins that I have every day. So when Paul and I speak quite often, and we speak a lot, we had a meeting this morning at about 7:15, and we talked about what our strategy was for this morning. And at 1:55, Paul called me with the news of what he's been doing this day, talking about the wins that he's had this morning. Okay, so we are talking constantly about what we do and why we do that, because we want to make sure that the wins become infectious. It becomes something that is contagious within our business, that we are winning more than we are losing. And we review each day when it finishes, and we always write a to-do list for tomorrow. So I make sure that to-do list, though, is covered with successes from there. So these are the tips about recruitment. And these are the tips, again, I'm going to link them back to where we are. You need to seize the day every day. And that means you've got to expect to win every day. In this marketplace, it is really hard, especially when you're working at home and you haven't got that buzz of the marketplace, or your clients aren't picking up. Winning is important. So you need to focus on activities that will make you money. Now, you might not get a placement, but if you're getting further down the line, or breaking into a new client, or you're finding more candidates to fit that candidate marketplace, or you've now sectioned out your clients, you know who you need to be targeting and why you're targeting them, all of a sudden, that's a win. I always try and beat my yesterday's performance, because if it can be measured, it can be improved. So every day I'm trying to beat what I did yesterday, but I know, and I'm a realist, that one day, let's look at last week. Last week, I converted 2 prospects into clients, had a great day. The following day, that means to beat that day, I'd have to convert 3. I went for it. It didn't quite happen. So what I did was I looked at what I performed and said, right, okay, tomorrow I've got to beat my new base. So I'm always looking at it each day. So I know what success looks like. Okay. So at the moment, what success looks like, what we normally say is go look at old recruiters, see what they're doing in order to be successful. We now need to be thinking from a business what we need to be doing from to be successful. Are my processes right? Is what I'm doing right? The next tip is we've got to start to learn everything. We've got to learn something each day. So what did I learn today? I learned today that the first line of that Pink Floyd song, which I thought for years was wasting away the moments that make up a dull day, is actually ticking away the moments that make up a dull day, which made me to start to think even more. But I read constantly. I do things constantly. I learn lots of things. I'm like a sponge. I listen to lots of people. At this moment in time, you can't learn from recruiters around you because you're working by yourself. So things like these webinars, other webinars, listening to what people say, reading books are going to be really important to help you develop yourself. So you need to listen to the best recruiters, copy what they do when you can, but you need to work hard at, when you haven't got that accessibility to other people, to finding out what good recruiters really do. Ring them up, talk to them, speak to them, okay? Make sure we're creating cross bonds within a marketplace. Look for someone that can potentially mentor you from within your business to become better at what you do. Learn from your mistakes. Mistakes are good if you learn from them, because it helps you manage your weaknesses. And I always think about mistakes in a very, very simple way. Mistakes are like the black box in an aeroplane. If you want to know why an aeroplane has crashed, the black box will tell you. But then the aviation will work out whether that is a problem with just once, that's only occurred once, or it's a problem that could potentially occur over and over again in other planes. Irrespective of that, they mandate the correction across the whole of the industry. We need to start looking at the mistakes that we're making. If you're making a mistake, correct it, but then talk to other people about the mistake, because it might be they're making a mistake as well. So all of a sudden you become a collaborative environment, talking to each other, sharing your strengths and sharing your weaknesses, what's working for you and what's not working for you. So learn something new every day from your colleagues, especially if you're working from home. Learn from your colleagues by talking to them and finding out what they are doing that is successful that you might not be doing. What are you doing that's making mistakes that you can change? Learn from them, pass on your good messages, and learn from those mistakes. So we should be communicating more in hindsight with everybody. We should be then starting to look at the next part. And the next part is very simply plan your day. We know now working from 9 to 5 is not really the option, because children are involved, etc., etc. But I know I can get hold of candidates early in the morning, late in the afternoon, etc. So my working day may have to change. So I have to plan my working day. I've just planned my working day for this week. And on Thursday, I've got a meeting at 7:30 in the evening with a Canadian client who is in Toronto. So I'm working with that person in Toronto. I'm then also working on Thursday night at 10:30 with a client from British Columbia, which is the west coast of Canada. So they're 8 hours rather than 4 hours behind us. So there we're doing one mid-afternoon and the other one is sort of mid-morning, etc. So I'm making myself available to my client base as you should be making yourself available to your candidate base. So just because we are structured normally 9 to 5 doesn't mean to say you have to work 9 to 5. Because you're working from home, you can take time to work with your family and have a great work-life balance, and then section times off during the day. So I know on Thursday at 2 o'clock, my good lady who is a school teacher, she finishes at 2 o'clock on Thursday because that's where she does. So we're going for a walk with the dog because I know I've got a 4-hour session in the evening with Canada. So I'm taking some time in the afternoon to do those type of things. So callbacks, recruitment calls, business development calls, etc. Break your day into sectors and work at those sectors from there. But those sectors don't have to flow after each other. You can work them when you want to work them. As long as you're maximizing your time, you're in a really good position. Focus on the areas that will make you money. We've talked about that an awful lot. Focus on the clients and the candidates that make you money. Stop focusing on the clients and the candidates that don't make you money. And we're all working with clients that do not make us money. We're all working with vanity clients. We just don't realize that we're working with vanity clients. So don't waste time trying to convince the inconvincibles to work with you. We've talked an awful lot over the last 13 weeks about technology. And, you know, the more we talk about embracing technology, your CRM, I hope you've been cleaning that up, okay? If your company hasn't cleaned it up, as a consultant, you should be cleaning up your part of the CRM to make yourself more productive. keep your data quality high and relevant and fresh. I see lots of people. So I see lots of people on these calls, on these webinars, and I see them on social media. Are they following me on social media? Are they following Live Work Life on social media? But when I see them, I like them. I like the things that they put out on social media. Why? It's a very simple thing. If you look at the posts on social media, let's say you post a job out on social media, you should really be telling all your colleagues that you're posting a job out on social media. Why? Because if people start to like it within the first hour, the algorithm on LinkedIn says this is a high activity post. Therefore, they'll post it to more people and they'll push it further up the line on people's viewing lists, etc., and home pages. So the more people that like your posts, the more people get to see your posts. So if you're posting a job out, then get your whole business to start to like that post, because then it will go to everybody's contacts. If you're posting an article out, same thing. If you want to create marketing strategies, get people to start to like your posts. The more people like your posts, the more people that start to see you. So I make a point of trying to like everyone's posts that I see. I obviously can't do everything, but I try to do that. So use social media wisely, but not slowly. Learn how to market yourself properly on social media. Okay, have an emotional attachment to the phone and now to the video. Do video calls. Learn how to make yourself better at doing any type of calls. And next week, I'm going to start doing a process on cold calling. Well, not cold calling, on calling clients and what we should be doing from there. But you need to maximize your daily call sector. You can only create relationships via face-to-face, via video, or over the phone. You can very seldom create a relationship just by texting and emailing people. And don't measure your overall call times. Measure the number of connections that you actually make. Who do you get through to? Who do you speak with? There's been lots of new technology coming into it, so immerse yourself in that technology, become an expert. We've talked a lot about knowing your numbers, so I'm just going to skip through knowing your numbers because most people know what we're going to say about knowing your numbers. You need to know how many clients you need to boss your niche market. How many buying clients do you have? How many CVs you need to send per week, and how many interviews you need to send per week? I would still use the same numbers that I was using prior to lockdown. Why? Because I want to drive to start to re-achieve those type of numbers. If I then reevaluate the clients that I'm working with and I'm still driving towards those numbers, how many more placements am I going to make? Because how many CVs did I send to the clients that would only get a 20% chance of filling compared to the CVs I sent to the 8% chance of filling roles? So I need to make sure I still drive my activity as I did before, but understand that if I'm changing my focus and target market, then there I am. So that's the question about diversification. Do my sums correctly. I'm not diversifying into a new market. I'm diversifying into a niche market within my own niche, the market that actually makes me more money. And that's the diversification that I would do first and foremost. Then I would look to jobs that are connected or roles that potentially connected to those type of clients that are next. Can I convert a client and teach them how to become more productive from a recruitment point of view and get more candidates through their recruitment process? We know how to do it on our really successful clients. Why aren't we teaching that to our clients that we're not successful at that? Why? Because we're generally afraid to. Our clients generally tell us that, no, it's my way or the highway. Well, fair enough. If they won't change their recruitment process where you're giving them quantifiable data that tells them why they should do that, then I would take the highway and I would leave. So how many placements do you need to hit target is really important as we come back into this marketplace. If I was a recruiter, I'd be looking to make one placement a month. Does that placement therefore cover my break-even point for my business overall? If it does, I'm in a good position. Then how do I increase that to be making it 2 placements a month, and so on and so on and so on, until I start to look at my break-even? So look at my individual break-even point and find out what that is and drive from there. So as we move on, we've got to start thinking about measuring things. If it can be measured, it can be improved. And we've talked about goals. We've talked about the number of jobs, etc., etc. Okay, we've talked about all these things that can be measured. If we can improve them, okay, and that's what this whole webinar has been about, improving all of these things. If I can improve the quality of jobs that I'm working on and the type of people I'm canvassing, then it will improve my CV to interview ratio. If I can start to improve that, then I'm in a real good position. So everything I've measured so far, I know will lead to an improvement. And if it leads to improvements, then I know it's going to lead to a more productive day, which will lead to a more productive month and lead to more profit in my pocket. So I'm working those things constantly all the time to make sure I'm there. And that means one thing. As recruiters, constantly, the busier we get, the more corners we cut. And everyone says at the moment, I'm not as stressed as I used to be about work. They're stressed about being off work, a lot of people, etc. And I accept that. But a lot of people talk about being in work and being stressed at work. And what happens when you're stressed is you do cut corners. Even when you're busy, you cut corners. Think, when you are leaving the house some morning, and I do this constantly, I'm a stickler for being somewhere on time. My good lady is a little bit more relaxed. So I'm out in the car going, come on, come on, come on. Okay, so I'm putting undue stress on my good lady. And how many times does she get into the car and go, oh, I forgot something because you're making me rush. You're stressing me out. You're making me stressed. So people forget things when they're stressed. So if you know your basics, don't compromise on your quality or service. Do not take the easy route just because it's quicker, because it is not quicker. You'll do things. Stop working those 20% opportunities because you have to work those opportunities 3 or 4 times. So they're not actually a 20% opportunity. Every time you work a job twice, it's costing you twice as much money. Stop that. It's costing you twice as much time. Do not work requirements without commitment. Do not submit candidates that do not match 90% of the requirement or the client if you're just submitting on a client base. And do not work requirements until your terms and conditions have been signed. These are all things that with people cut corners. And as we said, hope is not a strategy. If you're hoping that the market's going to come back and you're doing nothing to try and really identify the market that is coming back, then hope is your strategy, and you're going to need a lot of hope to get you through. If it goes wrong, the first place that I always look is in the mirror. And I look at the person staring back at myself and I ask this question, what could I do to change things? So if I know what good looks like, I need to replicate it. So to get within the hour, okay, the conclusion is focus on developing your most lucrative marketplace. Let's just stop focusing on the marketplace and start to find that Pareto's law, 80-20. If 80% of your profit comes from 20% of your requirements, then find other requirements like that 20%. If 20% of your profit comes from 80% of the jobs that you work, you've got to address those jobs. If you can convert that time into more lucrative time, you will make more money. Focus on the mountain that you must climb and focus on the bottom of that mountain. Focus on getting the basics right, understanding what you need to be doing. Grade your requirements. Know what your client base looks like. Show me the money. Show me the money is, the 80s, or was it a 90s film all about show me the money, However, I'm putting it in a different light. Show me the clients where I make my money and then focus on that client. Strange Jerry Maguire focused on one client and made all his money out of one client, and then things start to explode. Focus on what you have, okay? Have a regular health check, an apple a day type scenario. Have a regular health check on what your business is doing. Do not just carry on working and working and working, because generally what happens when you work in that fashion, things stop happening. you come a little bit blasé, you come a little bit there. And I'll give you a true story. So I train an awful lot, and over lockdown I've been working lots of hours, and I've probably been negating my training, and I've suddenly realized I'm not become as flexible as I used to be. So the morning at the moment, at 6:45 every morning, I'm spending 15 minutes stretching. Through lunch, I'm spending 15 minutes stretching. During that time, I'm watching the documentary that's on the Chicago Bulls about how they built their ultimate winning team. So I'm seizing my moment. I'm doing a health check on myself, and I'm making sure that I'm fit for when I want to start going back to training full time when work allows. Then I can do that, because I want to be able to seize my day and I want to do things. So I'm changed from doing long things. I'm doing things little, but I'm doing them often. I know without my plan, I do get lost, but I also know that technology is my friend, and that everyone understands that technology now can take you to different places. So if you can automate things, if you can take things off your desk that you have to do from a manual point of view and do it technically, then it'll save you time. It means you can then be more client focused or more candidate focused and be more facing every day. We know that knowing your sums increases performance. If you can measure it, it can be improved. We know not to cut corners. So that is the same presentation that I gave 4 or 5 weeks ago, but in a very different style, in a very different way. I'm interested if people have got questions or people have got thoughts. I'm interested if people are actually doing those type of things now and getting that granular with their data that they can start to see where their market is absolutely going to come back or is already back, and therefore that is where I'm focusing on to make my money. Because as consultants, you have got the responsibility for your own success. I always say that, you know, your success is a pair of very capable hands, and they're not my hands. They're not your boss's hands. They're not anybody else's hands. They're your hands. Your success is in your hands. You seize the opportunities to do that. So when we start talking about all these things that we've gone through over the last 13 weeks and all these webinars, how much of those things have you applied? How much of those things are you going to apply? What do you need help in applying? And if you need help, ask. There's nothing wrong in asking for help. And once we get that help, then we need to then implement it and work it to the best we can. So if there's no questions, I'd like to thank you for your time. Next week, we're on selling, doing sales calls, because I think it's time we start to look at the sales call and look what's going on the sales call. If you've got questions, feel free to pop questions to me. But once again, thank you very much for attending. It's been much appreciated. I wish you all a happy Wednesday, and I look forward to seeing you next week.